Hi, everybody. Brianna Whitney here, host of True Crime AZ Live. Thank you for joining us this week. We've got a big show on tap for tonight, and I think these three cases are kind of unique because all three of them, we have really crazy, intricate details. We don't always have those as cases are unfolding, so I'm looking forward to kind of diving into all the details with you guys. If you're watching live, please write questions, give us comments. We can answer them and interact with you guys live, and that's something we love to do. But this first case tonight, it's one that has really gone national here in Arizona. Over the last week, we've learned so much in these bizarre teenage murders. So that's where we start tonight, segment one, the big case. All right, so these were some bizarre camping murders of these two teens you're seeing on your screen, Pandora Kjolsrud and Evan Clark. They were 17 and 18 years old. They went to Arcadia High School here in the Phoenix area, and they were camping in May at a place called Mount Ord. It's in the Tonto National Forest. It's a popular camping spot. You can kind of pull off on the areas where you can camp in your car, and that's what these two were doing. So they go to this camping trip. It was just supposed to be an overnight trip. And Pandora's mom, Simone, had her location. The two teens got there. They were sending pictures to their parents. Hey, look, we've made it. We're doing some hiking up the mountain. We're going to spend the night. And there were other people camping in the area as well. But they were supposed to come back the next morning. And when neither of their parents heard from them, Pandora's mom checked her Life 360 app, which had Pandora's location, and saw that it was still at Mount Ord. She thought that was really weird, so she called authorities, and at the time, that went to the Gila County Sheriff's Office. So they sent out a deputy to see where the kids were. And that deputy gets there and sees this kind of odd scene. They're able to locate Evan's car, the Mercedes that the two took up, but something looks off. Only one of the doors is unlocked, and he noticed that there was blood on the back bumper. And so he calls in backup, and they start looking for the teens because you got this car. They can see that this blood, and it looks off. And when they go into the car, they realize there's also a bloody pillowcase. So now it's like, what happened in this car, around this car, and where are Pandora and Evan? Well, they start to notice that on the ground there were these drag marks that look like something or somebody had been dragged. And they start following those off of the trail. And that's where they find Pandora and Evan both dead, off the trail, shot multiple times. Now, this is weird because off the bat, you're thinking this is pretty remote. Is this a murder-suicide? No. They were both shot multiple times. It was clear off the bat that this was not a murder-suicide. And so who would have shot them? And in this day and age, what makes an investigation go so much faster is technology, surveillance footage, GPS location, all of that stuff. A lot of that wasn't either in the area because it was a remote camping area. So there weren't just surveillance cameras or Ring doorbell cameras. And the cell phone service was in and out. So yeah, Pandora's mom had her location, but it wasn't perfectly accurate. So trying to figure out who was in the area and what actually happened was extremely difficult. So for months, in Arizona, this case kind of went cold. And we had known about it, and we knew that the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office was investigating it because where their bodies were, they actually assumed the jurisdiction over Gila County. So when MCSO took over, we're used to working with MCSO. And it was one of those weird ones where it was like, this is odd. We don't know what's going on. From a public perspective, from a media perspective, we didn't know what leads that they had. In fact, they were asking the community for help. So we thought there might be nothing new. But then during this show last Thursday, there was a surprise arrest in the case. And all of a sudden, MCSO was posting on their YouTube page that they had made an arrest of 31-year-old Thomas Brown. So we start learning about Thomas Brown in real time as this show's going on and into the night, trying to figure out who is this guy and did the teens know him? So we start learning a little bit more once we get court paperwork into Thomas Brown and he's processed within the jail. And we learn that this guy lives in Chandler, and turns out he had inserted himself into the investigation. You can see him here. This is when he was arrested and getting processed into the county jail here in Phoenix. This guy was camping at the time that the teens were, and the reason that detectives knew that was because he had actually inserted himself in the investigation right away. He went to detectives and said, hey, this is crazy. I have drone footage of the area. I was there camping first with my wife and our dog Snoopy, but my wife left on that first day and I stayed behind to camp one day longer. So he had actually tried to be helpful to detectives. And in looking at his social media, we were able to find his Facebook page, his Reddit page. He posted about this camping trip. He showed pictures of him and his dog Snoopy, talking about being out there, that there was some other group that was playing loud music nearby that was kind of annoying. I don't believe it was Evan and Pandora. There was another group of 5 campers that were in the area that had some contact with this guy. And then he posted about the crime itself. And he said how this was terrible and devastating news, how him and Snoopy had been out there at the time, and that how tragic it was that these young teens were just getting their adult lives started. So it wasn't a surprise to detectives that he was out there and that his DNA could be out there, but things were a little off. They ended up finding bloody gloves that were also dropped at the crime scene. And they also found other evidentiary pieces that were kind of scattered around. Well, Thomas Brown tells detectives that he did come along Evan and Pandora's belongings while he was hiking, saw them, kind of picked up what was like an air rifle and some other items, but put them back and left them there. My guess is he said that and told them that because that would then put his DNA in the area. But what Thomas Brown didn't know was that his DNA was on those bloody gloves, and his DNA was also in Evan's car. And this directly tied him to what MCSO believes is the murder suspect. Now, he also has an interesting background that plays a big role in this. Those two were shot multiple times. Thomas Brown is a military veteran. He was part of the National Guard. And since then, he got out in 2022. He now owns a business of 3D printing military rifle accessories for guns. That's what he does. He prints them, he creates them, and he sells them. And he has videos on his social media pages of using those kind of style of accessories that he makes. But we don't know what the actual murder weapon was. We know it was some sort of gun, but MCSO detectives remained really tight-lipped about what the actual weapon was. And did that involve any of his 3D printed rifle accessories? We don't know that right now. Everything's being looked at, but that does complicate the investigation in terms of how you track something like that because it's just not the same as a regular gun. So I want to play you some sound from Captain David Lee of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, who was describing the investigation, because the big question here is, what happened? Why would Thomas Brown have brutally killed 2 teens? Was there a motive? He addresses where they are in the investigation right now.
But at this time, we do not have any information to suggest that there was any evidence of any connection between Evan Clark, Pandora Kjolsrud, and Thomas Brown. We're unaware of any allegation that Evan and Pandora's action or conduct contributed to their deaths. At this time, the information we have suggested that Brown acted alone and that there was no further danger to the community from him.
Are you guys looking into his work in terms of 3D printed guns?
We're looking into everything. Generally speaking, 3D printed weapons, it's not something that functions the way a weapon that one of us carries at work, where it's repeatable, it's reliable, it continues to work. It's usually something that's got just a couple shots in it, and it's not really capable of continuing to fire, reloading quickly, things like that. And that's just generally speaking. As far as the weapon, I can't speak to whether or not that is what was used.
Now, I've talked to MCSO a little bit more. It does seem that that's not a main part of their investigation in terms of what they're looking at crucially right now. So it's very possible it was not a 3D printed accessory that was on the gun, but it is weird. We don't know if they even have the murder weapon. So there's a lot of unknown here. Police also were able to make contact with 5 campers who were also next to Thomas Brown, and they thought he was acting strange and weird. But of course, we see this all the time. People acting strange and weird isn't a crime. So they didn't call in anything because they didn't know what was going on, nor did they hear anything out of sorts. After that press conference, I then went to Thomas Brown's home in Chandler, Arizona. And this was an interesting experience. For one thing, we know that Thomas's wife was with him at least one of the days camping at Mount Ord. So I wanted to know what she knew. We reached out to her, calling, texting, didn't hear back. And that's understandable and honestly to be expected. So we wanted to go see where he lived, and did neighbors know anything about Thomas Brown? Knocked on their door, and an older man answered the door. He was very kind. He did say this was Thomas and his wife's home, said they were not there. Obviously, Thomas was in custody, but the wife was not there. Identified himself as a family member, but not as Thomas's dad, and said that they had no comment. The dog that was at the door was the exact same dog that was in all the pictures, Snoopy, with Thomas Brown that he had posted from that camping trip. So that was a strikeout in terms of the actual home and anybody talking there. But on either side of that house, multiple neighbors came out to talk to us. The first ones were super confused, so much so that they actually thought we must have been talking about the old neighbors there, because that guy was super nice. And at first we thought maybe it was an old neighbor, but when I pulled up his mugshot, that seemed to rattle them. They were like, no, that's him. So I went then to the other next door neighbor, and this is where I learned a whole lot more. She was super nice, did not want to go on camera, but said that she was absolutely stunned by his arrest, and said I could quote her on, quote, "I would trust him with myself." She was friends with him and his wife, and was like, this is outrageous. Like, we really can't fathom him doing anything like this. And she said, innocent until proven guilty, but that this was probably the most shocking thing that she had heard. She actually watched the police cars in the area. They came and got him. He was then in the back of that deputy's car as they were taking him into custody, and she was just bewildered by this whole thing. And so that was interesting too, because, people have said in his mugshot, he's got kind of that dead look in his eyes, a lot like Brian Kohberger in the Idaho 4 college student's murder. And a lot of people have kind of compared it to that. Like, what would be a motive to take these kids' lives? And this doesn't make sense. But in Brian Kohberger's case, he was acting weird all the time. And people attested to that he was, angry towards females and made people feel uncomfortable. In this case, I was shocked that the neighbors said, this guy is pure and clean, and we love him. Like, this is crazy. And so it's hard for people right now because we have no idea what happened. And if MCSO doesn't believe that there was any sort of argument or that Evan and Pandora did something to set him off, it really begs the question of what was going through his head at the time if he did do this, and how did it escalate to a point like that? They wouldn't comment on Thomas Brown's mental health. I don't know if that's going to become part of this case, but that was something that MCSO purposefully did not touch on. And so now we're waiting for any sort of details to come out as to how this happened. And I think it might be similar to the Kohberger case in that we may never get those details. We did request a jailhouse interview with Thomas Brown. He declined. I'm not surprised. I also messaged him, trying to get a hold of him. Haven't heard back. So there is a lot of mystery and tragedy that surrounds this case right now. And as we were learning things about the suspect, we're keeping the victims front of mind. And I mean, this is just a horrific situation. These two teens who just were trying to camp and enjoy their night are killed. And at the press conference, Pandora's mom, Simone, was also there. She bravely got up and spoke about her daughter and the case. And I want to play what she had to say about there being an arrest and how she wants her daughter to be remembered.
My daughter, Pandora, was a beautiful, brilliant light in this world. She was so full of life and joy and love. She was the type of person you never forget after meeting her. But the light and love and beauty she gave us will be in our hearts forever. And the darkness that she encountered on that day when she met her killer will not define her life. His darkness will never overcome her light. Over the past 4 months, I have prayed every day that her killer would eventually be brought to justice. My daughter's life matters, and I look forward to the day the perpetrator is convicted and punished for his crimes. That's all I have to say.
It was super brave of her to get up there, address all the media, knowing that people were going to have so many questions and she has to relive this every time she has to talk about it. We also had one of our reporters talk to Evan Clark's mom on the phone, who said she was so thankful that this person is now off the street and that Evan was the light of her life. I just can't imagine what these families are going through, and still so much confusion as to why. And maybe if they ever got an answer, it wouldn't matter, because it wouldn't take away the pain of the fact that this happened at all. But what happened out there? And are we going to find out? That's what we need to know. So we're going to be staying on top of this case for sure as it unravels itself in the criminal justice system, and hopefully learn more about what Thomas Brown allegedly did, and if this will go to trial or will end in some sort of plea deal. We'll definitely be following it through to the end. So more to come on that case, but a lot has developed in just the 7 days since we were sitting here all together last week. Coming up after the break, we've got a really great live interview on tap for you. A former cold case detective who solved the infamous zombie hunter case here in Arizona, the Phoenix Canal Murders. He's got a new tell-all book about the investigation. We're going to go into that book with him, and he's going to talk about what you can expect, all coming up on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome back to segment 2. This is a case that if you've followed my reporting for a while now, you know about the zombie hunter case. Those two victims you just saw on your screen, Angela Brasso and Melanie Bernis, were two young women killed back in the 90s. And let's start with the beginning here. This is when they were searching these crime scenes, but it was back in November of 1992. 22-year-old Angela Brasso left her apartment to ride her bike along the Arizona Canal, just like many people, families, anybody did at that time. It was just the evening. Her boyfriend was back baking her a cake because it was her birthday, and she never came back from that bike ride. This was a common occurrence, and Angela there is on the right side of your screen. She was found brutally stabbed to death, and she was decapitated. A fisherman actually found her head in the canal. And at that point, investigators knew this was so heinous, and it was a worry to the whole community, because if a woman who was just bike riding in the evening, it was still light out, could be killed like that, who was next and who was doing this? And at the time, I mean, these cuts, these stabs were so precise. They thought maybe it was like a military person or somebody who would have a lot of experience with that kind of knife and type of violence. Next to Angela here is Melanie Bernis in September of 93, so not even a full year later. She was 17 years old, Arcadia High School student. She was also biking along the canal, but a different part of it in Phoenix. And she was found dead, stabbed to death, and also dressed in this kind of weird swimsuit that didn't belong to her. These two crimes shook the community, but perhaps the most stunning and concerning part of this whole thing at the time was that investigators were able to determine that the same DNA was left at both crime scenes, but they couldn't figure out who it belonged to. And remember, we're talking early 90s at that point. So DNA really had not come to where it is today. But they knew they had the same perpetrator DNA. So fast forward decades later, and they still have the DNA from both cases, and thought maybe some new technology like genetic genealogy could make a match into who this belonged to. And so they ended up hiring an outside source, a genetic genealogist, to look at the DNA. That genealogist was able to come up with the name Miller. And that's when investigators started going into their files to see if they had any potential suspects that matched that. Well, they ended up finding somebody in their files named Brian Patrick Miller. And in just a minute here, we're going to go into how he was caught. But you can see him on your screen right here. Brian Patrick Miller's DNA was a match to both of those scenes. The thing about him is he was no stranger to the community, because at the time when he was caught in 2015, he looked like that. You see him on your screen right here, the zombie hunter. This was a man who bought an old police car, tricked it out, put a zombie in the back, put blood dripping off of it, would dress up, show up at parades, would show up at the Renaissance Festival, would take pictures with detectives like the good guys out here fighting the bad. He had this whole trench coat get up and a Gatling gun. I mean, this was a thing in Phoenix. You knew who the zombie hunter was. And to think now that this man, decades later, was then connected to these heinous murders in the early 90s when he was young was completely startling. This was a really intense investigation, and we can credit the fact that Brian Patrick Miller was caught at all to the cold case detective that spent a lot of time trying to track him down. So I want to bring in our live interview tonight, Troy Hillman. Troy, you and I have worked together now for, 5 years on this case.
Yes.
It's been a long time. I mean, you put so much time into all of this. And so I think what people don't know or may not know is how much truly went into catching Brian Patrick Miller and what those implications were at the time. And I should note, he has gone through a very lengthy trial. He was found guilty. He tried to say he had dissociative amnesia. The judge did not buy that, and he was sentenced to death. So he is now on death row here in Arizona. Let's go back to when you first got this investigation. And the reason we have you on is because you've been writing this book for years now about how you were able to catch the zombie hunter. When you first got this case as a cold case detective, where did it stand? I mean, what did you have to do to try to move it forward?
Well, I'll say that we worked this as a team. This was not just me, and it was a collective group that all had their kind of nuances. And we had a media records request that I received, and I poured through it, and it was massive. And I guess I looked at it and I said, why don't we know where this guy is or what he's done? Or you don't start off by doing what he did to Angela and then leave off. There was just so many unanswered questions, and the level of brutality was off the charts.
Yeah, and so you get this, and at the time, this genetic genealogy, I mean, we hear about it all the time now, but at the time, that 2015, this was not being used all the time. And I guess even 2014, because he was arrested in January of 2015. So tell me, you get this DNA, you're looking at the case file. How do you decide to go that route, and what did that entail on your end?
Well, we got a call from Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, and she basically said she thought she could help us, and then showed us basically a PowerPoint of what she did. But this was, again, 2014. Nobody really had used this technology on a major serial killer type case. And this is before the Golden State Killer, which was in 2018. So we really took a chance. But to me, it was a win-win situation. It was a small amount of money, and really we would just give her information that wouldn't jeopardize the case. But it took a couple months to get approved.
It was also criticized at the time, right? I mean, there was some risk here in terms of privacy and why you would use this kind of new technique versus the traditional way.
Yeah, it was kind of labeled as voodoo or witchcraft, some people said, and nobody really understood it. And I think that was kind of the weird part. But to me, cold case is all about innovative techniques and looking for the latest technology and saying, what can we do now that we couldn't do earlier? So to me, this fit, and the fact that she was able to produce a surname out of a group of basic numbers, and I don't completely even understand what she does to this day. She has a PhD from brilliant. But it worked. And then the VDOC Society said, hey, he's going to be in your files most likely. There's over a 97% chance. And so those two things together coalesced, and then there was Brian Patrick Miller.
And when you say the VDOC Society, if you could tell our viewers what they do, I mean, they're basically identifying the type of killer you're looking for in a case, right?
Yeah, they're a society, a group of experts that meet kind of pro bono and go over cases for detectives around the country and give ideas on what we've maybe missed and what we could do, new techniques. And one of the main things was this type of guy is a Bundy Dahmer, and he's going to be in your files. I
mean, and you could kind of characterize him in that. I know it's different, but same kind of high level of violence and repetitive offender. So you get the name, and I know we talk about this all the time among us, but some people might not realize when you get a genetic genealogy name like that, it's a really great lead, but it is just a lead. It's not confirmation that somebody did something. So you get this lead, and you guys have to perform what I would say is an undercover operation to get Brian Patrick Miller's DNA at a Chili's. Can you describe how this undercover op went and what you guys got?
So we had been following Miller around. He'd worked at Amazon, and he drove the zombie hunter mobile. And every single break, he'd go out there and just listen to heavy metal and really didn't discard any trash, didn't smoke. So one of my brilliant detectives, Clark, said, hey, I've got a kind of a ruse. And he basically ran it by me. I was good with it. And basically it was, hey, we want Brian to think he's going on a job interview of a sorts. And basically look for, we knew he was into security, and his mom was a detention officer. So he took the bait. Basically, we wanted him to kind of think that he was on this job interview at Chili's, and he showed up. But the only problem was he brought his 15-year-old daughter with him.
And so what'd you do about that? I mean, she's there, but you needed basically his DNA from like a cup or a plate, something like that, right?
Yeah, we needed to keep eyes on who was doing what, and because we knew Clark was meeting with him and busy. So we had a couple groups at different tables kind of watching what was going on. And it was kind of surreal because most people were Friday afternoon at happy hour, boneless wings and beer. But we were so focused on this potential serial killer that was right there in front of us. But I can't emphasize enough that during this 3.5-year journey that we hunted him, that there were so many ups and downs and so many perpetrators we ruled out. So we were trying to pump the brakes on not getting too excited, but we were he lined up on paper.
And you were able to get his DNA from a cup from that Chili's, and that ultimately did match the DNA from the Canal Murders killings. So he's arrested. I mean, and this just sends the community into a frenzy because they've seen this guy. He's kind of a public figure. Weird, sure, but I mean, people knew who he was, and he would take pictures with everybody. In terms of looking into Brian Patrick Miller, I mean, gosh, you and I could talk for hours about the amount of evidence that was in this case and the amount of disturbing things we found too. Bizarre things on his Amazon wish list, and like pornographic, showing violence with nude women and children, and a binder full of these kinds of things. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on with some disturbing things that he had. But one thing that we learned in the trial that they elaborated on was that they found Brian Patrick Miller's notebook, and in it was something called the plan. Can you talk to us about what the plan said in this notebook?
Yeah, the plan was something, so Brian was incarcerated as a juvenile and for stabbing a woman in the back, of all things. And basically his mother found this plan or this notebook in his room, and she said, I need to take this to the police. So she took it to Cactus Park Precinct and turned it in, and basically it detailed It named a woman who appeared to be fictitious, but basically walked through what she was wearing, and really got into detail on how he was going to rape and kill her. And it kind of paralleled our first murder with Angela Brasso, and it was chilling in that aspect.
Yeah, and that became something that I think affected the judge in his trial as well. Just the fact that he had these thoughts and had a plan to carry them out. And you did say it. He was a boy, a teen. He had stabbed a woman at the bus stop that he claimed looked like his mom or reminded him of his mom. He had an interesting and complicated relationship with his mom. And that woman, thankfully, is alive today. There are a couple other victims that are likely linked to Brian Patrick Miller. Two of them were up in Washington. But one of them here, the Brandy Myers case, if you could just let our viewers know who Brandy Myers is. She lived a couple doors down from Brian at the time she went missing while collecting money for a school bookathon. And what did we learn about his potential involvement in her murder and disappearance?
Yeah, so while one detective was interviewing Brian that night of the arrest, we simultaneously interviewed his ex-wife. And they always say the scorn of a woman, and she gave us a lot. Basically, she told us that it was very disturbing that he had told her during their marriage that he'd pulled this little Girl Scout into his apartment and basically killed her, and then he wanted to preserve the body, which was horrendous. But he ran hot water instead of cold, so then he had to dispose of the body. And what was even worse was he was living with church members, had taken him in, members of Mennonite church, and they described the smell of what we would know as police officers as death. So they had to, he kind of, to me, was just a horrible human being.
Yeah, I mean, and I know investigators believe that he did kill Brandy Myers, but ultimately the Maricopa County Attorney's Office did not go forward with prosecuting him in the case due to what they felt was a lack of evidence. I mean, do you ever think Brandy's case will get solved?
I think it's difficult. It's a what they would call a no body homicide, which without the body you can't really tell exactly what happened. And I know personally, I know Stu Summershoe, the detective that worked that case, and he worked it to. He's one of the best detectives I know, and he worked it. So he, unfortunately, there's just not a lot that can be done due to time. And I think the good thing is Brian's on death row and gonna remain out of society.
Yeah. I mean, this whole case is one of those movie style crimes. There's so much to it. And so talk to me about how you decided to write a book, what people can see in the book, what they'll learn, and just really your passion behind this. I mean, I think I get to talk to you all the time, but for people watching, like Troy, you're super passionate about cold cases and the advocacy is huge. So I know being able to do something like this means a lot to you personally too.
Well, we thought we really had a handle on solving cold cases. We built this squad and kind of compiled these elite detectives and really figured out a system. And we were knocking off cases dating back to the 70s, and then solved basically this serial killer investigation. And then due to budget cuts, the leadership at the time, I believe Phoenix PD blew, but I also, at the leadership at the time, made a bad decision, in my opinion, and decided to disband the squad. And they basically tried to send me back to patrol. At that point, I said, I have to tell the world about these cases, these women's cases. The Canal Murders are the poster child of why cold cases matter. Because we can't give up. We can't just say, oh, he's probably dead. He's been in the DNA system forever. Let's give up. And if we had done that, that would have been the easy route. But Brian Patrick Miller would probably be still running around in a zombie hunter, and who knows, doing who knows what.
Yeah, right. And so the book, and I know you have it next to you if you want to hold it up here so people can see it, just came out this week. People can order it, called Chasing a little to your, there you go. There you go. Chasing Down the Zombie Hunter. Tell us what people can find in the book. What do you reveal there, and just the making of that book? I know it's taken you years to finish this.
Yeah, my mother was an English teacher, so I thought I was a decent writer, but I realized that it's not all that easy to put together a book. It's been through multiple revisions, but I wanted to really take the reader through the investigation, and I wanted them to meet the team and all the nuances of each detective and kind of what made them special, and then how we progressed and all the ups and downs and the kind of roller coaster ride of this 3.5 years, and then the VDOC Society, and then meeting Colleen and using forensic genealogy, and just all the ups and downs, and then the fact that Brian was not just some layman; he was this odd, creepy, eccentric figure, this zombie hunter. I'm like, wow, this story has to be told. And it again is the poster child of why cold cases matter. We can't give up on those families and their those victims.
Absolutely. And where can people find the book right now if they want to order it, they want to go purchase it? Where should they go?
It was distributed by Simon and Schuster. It's on their website. It's also on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, just a host of anywhere you can pick up a book. It's also available on audio. You can download that on either I think Spotify or on Amazon.
Oh, it's perfect. And somebody commented that it's an awesome book and they're working on their second read through of it right now. So already getting positive reviews and it's just come out. So Troy, thank you so much. I think for me personally too, in this industry and true crime, I just love meeting detectives like you and people like you who are passionate, who have poured so much into cases like this. I mean, it makes a real difference, and I'm lucky that we get to work together. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on live on the show and tell us about this. And I can't wait to read more of the book. Even though I know everything about this case, I'm sure there's so much that I still don't know because there's just more into it. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Awesome. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Troy. All right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for the comments from friends and others and great questions as well. Next segment, the final segment in the show, this is a shocking murder out of Texas. The woman who killed her 5th husband with insulin. So bizarre. We're going to get to what happened in court this week and today. She learned her fate, how long she'll spend behind bars. We'll be right back after this last break. Final segment of True Crime AZ Live tonight, this one out of Texas. When I was looking for other segments to cover on the show, I knew I was covering those 2 cases earlier, but I was looking for a 3rd case, and all of a sudden I saw this and thought, oh my God, what? This is crazy. Okay, so let's tell you about it. We're talking about Sarah Hartsfield, a woman out of Texas who this week was convicted of killing her most recent husband, her 5th husband, and sentenced today to life in prison. Let's talk about who she is, who he is, and kind of what came of this case. So Joseph Hartsfield was Sarah's 5th husband, died of an overdose of insulin. You can see Sarah here on your screen. Now, the prosecution said that Joseph and Sarah would constantly fight even just after a few months, and that Joseph was planning on leaving her, but that Sarah was going to do whatever it took to keep him with her. Well, in January of 2023, he suffered this diabetic emergency, and prosecutors said Sarah delayed calling for help in this, and that there were evidence of insulin shots and things all over the area that he was found in, and ultimately that led to his death. Now, Sarah's defense team said that Joseph mismanaged his diabetes and that there was actually no known cause of death in this case, so therefore she could not possibly be responsible. But here's the thing. This trial went on for 1 week only, and for a murder trial, it's honestly pretty short. And there was some bombshell testimony that happened here. For example, Joseph's mom testified she started to worry after Sarah admitted that she had killed her ex-fiance. What? We'll get to that again in a second here because that becomes really important in this story. But apparently, Joseph's mom testified that her son confided fears of dying in his sleep and asked her for money so he could open a new bank account when he planned to leave Sarah. Now, they also played a voicemail from Joseph that he left after he had returned home from a fight with Sarah. This was played in court, and he told his mom, quote, "I went home preparing to be shot, but nothing happened." Okay, bizarre. He was hospitalized a few days later from insulin complications where he eventually was pronounced dead. Now, let's talk about this fiance that was shot dead as well. In May of 2018, Sarah Hartsfield had killed her fiance, David Bragg, in Minnesota. She said it was self-defense, that he shot first, and then she shot him to defend herself in that case. So she was never charged for David Bragg's murder. She was using a different last name at the time, and that was never a case that was fully investigated because they thought case closed. Well, now things are a little bit different. That case is being reopened because there's another husband of Sarah's that came forward. His name is Titus, and he said, well, I also feared for my life for a while, and he actually talked about it in public on the media. I want to show you what he had to say about his time with Sarah.
I was honestly surprised to get out of my marriage alive because I was in the Army. I had a $200,000 life insurance on myself at the time. So I was very concerned that I would end up dead so she could get the money.
Okay. Clearly there's an issue here. And when people started digging more into Sarah's past, they found out that she has lived in 39 different places. She has been married 5 times. So now not only is the Minnesota investigation back open, but detectives and investigators believe that there is a high chance Sarah Hartsfield could be connected to other deaths around the country. And the sheriff addressed that in Texas too.
Now we have other cases that have been reopened in other states. And I'm glad they have reopened those cases because I feel like they're probably going to find a very similar scenario as to what we have.
So is it possible that Sarah Hartsfield could be a serial killer? Potentially. It's not confirmed yet, and we don't know exactly what happened with everything in the Minnesota case. They're going to have to reinvestigate. But things just kept coming up about her past, and honestly, in our newsroom, we started talking about how this felt eerily similar to Lori Vallow Daybell and the fact that she also had 5 husbands and that multiple of them ended up dead. It felt like a similar thing minus the religious aspect of it, at least that we know so far. We do know Sarah Hartsfield will not be able to commit a crime again because she is now behind bars for life, but we do continue to learn more, and there is a possibility that other investigations could be reopened and other deaths or murders possibly linked to Sarah Hartsfield. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I really enjoyed the conversation with Troy. There's just a lot of details unfolding in these cases as we speak, and those are honestly my favorite ones to talk about, where we can really dive in and bring you guys into these investigations, sometimes in real time with us. So thank you so much to everybody who joined us live. Thank you to people who are watching this afterwards as well. You can catch us on True Crime AZ Live, our Instagram page. We post clips from the show, and you can engage with us there too. We also have a True Crime AZ Live TikTok page that we'd love to see you at as well. Again, thank you to everybody who watched live. We'll see you next Thursday. We have kind of a special show lined up for next Thursday because we have an execution that is happening here in Arizona next Friday, and it is an execution that I'm actually going to witness as a media witness. A lot to come, a huge case, decades long. We've got that next execution set here in Arizona. We're going to talk all about it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on True Crime AZ Live this week. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.